This is the second part of the lesson for 1-4. And so we've been talking about multi-step equations. Now we're going to use our skills with equations and properties to solve some problems. This next part of the lesson is reviewing some things that you learned last year. And so we are going to talk about parallel lines. So a couple of things, if you remember from last year, when you have two parallel lines and they're cut by a transversal, it creates these other angles, and these are special angles that have special properties. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is angle 2 and this angle 4 and so on. So if you remember some things that we talked about last year, if you have line A and B, they're parallel. This is the symbol for parallel. So if you see that, that's what that means. They're cut by a transversal line C. So here's A and B and line C, that's the transversal. If two angles form a straight line, then their sum is 180. So what that means is if you look at like angle 1 and angle 2, the two angles together make this straight line. So that's also called a straight angle. And they're going to be supplementary. So we could say that angle 1 plus angle 2 is equal to 180. And so another example I've got written here is angle 6 plus angle 8 is equal to 180 because they would add. So the way we write that is we write m for the measure of angle 6 plus the measure of angle 8 is equal to 180. We use the m's when we're talking about a number. So how many degrees would be a number? If two angles are vertical angles. So if you remember this from last year, when you have two lines that intersect, the two angles that are not next to each other, they're called vertical angles. That's going to be something that's going to keep coming up. So their measures are equal to each other. So the measure of angle 6 and the measure of angle 7 are equal to each other. So if angle 6 was equal to 120 degrees, then angle 7 would also be equal to 120 degrees. Okay, there are also some special angles, and these are types that you learned about last year. So corresponding angles. So an example of corresponding angles are going to be in the same location relative to their lines. So if you look at angle 2, that's going to be corresponding. It's above the parallel line and to the right of the transversal. It's going to correspond with the other angle that's above the parallel line and to the right of the transversal. So that would be angle 6. So angle 2 and angle 6 would be a pair of corresponding angles. So can you name some other pairs of corresponding angles? So go ahead and pause the video and write down other sets of corresponding angles on your paper. Other sets of corresponding angles, and you don't have to write them in any particular order, but angle 4 and angle 8 would be corresponding angles. Angle 1 and angle 5 would be corresponding angles. And angle 3 and angle 7 would be corresponding angles. Those are all the sets of corresponding angles. Okay, the next one is alternate interior angles. Now the word alternate means alternating sides or alternate sides of something, and interior means inside. So if you look at your parallel lines, if you look at the walls of a house, the interior angles are those, the 3, 4, 5, and 6. Those are interior angles. So if I'm talking about the alternate interior angles, they would have to be on different sides. So 3 and 6 would be alternate interior angles. What's another set of alternate interior angles? Angle 4 and angle 5 would be another set of alternate interior angles. Okay, on this next set of questions, on number 7, we're going to talk about supplementary angles. So any two angles that add to be 180 degrees. Okay, so angles that are forming a straight angle, like we saw some examples before, like angle 7 and angle 8. So we could say that angle 7 and angle 8 are supplementary angles because they would add to be 180. What are some other sets that are going to add to be 180? So pause the video and write all of the possible things you can think of. Okay, some other examples of supplementary angles would be angle 6 and angle 8. Did you get those? Angle 5 and angle 6. Angle 5 and angle 7. So that's all the ones from this set right there. And then you can come up with all of the possibilities from the set that's up here. So you could say, I don't have room for everything, but angle 1 and angle 2. You could say angle 2 and angle 4. You could say angle 4 and angle 3. You could say angle 3 and angle 1. Those are all supplementary angles. Now there are some other possibilities, but without getting into some other properties of parallel lines, we're not going to do that. So just leaving it at that 8 will be fine. Okay, the next one is alternate exterior angles. Now you might be able to figure out what that means if you don't remember from our previous discussion on number 6. Alternate means different sides. Exterior, so if these are the walls of your house, what are the exterior angles? That's going to be these. So which ones would be alternate exterior angles? So go ahead and write those down. Angle 1 and angle 8 would be alternate exterior angles. And angle 2 and angle 7 would be alternate exterior angles. Okay, number 9, vertical angles. Give me sets of vertical angles. So remember, vertical angles are when you have two intersecting lines, the two angles that are not adjacent or not next to each other. So what would the vertical angles be here? So we already used the example of angle 6 and angle 7. So what are some other vertical angles? Okay, angle 5 and angle 8 are vertical angles. Angle 2 and angle 3 are vertical angles. And angle 1 and angle 4 are vertical angles. Okay, number 10. I would like you to tell me what the measure of angle 1 is equal to. Now you can't tell me something like 40 degrees, but you do know that angle 1 has the same measure as which other angle? You've got a lot of choices here actually. You could say angle 4 because those are vertical angles, but what else is going to be the same? If you remember from last year, you learned that alternate exterior angles have the same measure as well. So you could also say, oh, we have to say the measure of angle 4, the measure of angle 8. Okay, also we learned last year, and this was on my previous slide, but we also learned last year that alternate interior angles have the same measure and corresponding angles have the same measure. So you could also say 1 corresponds with 5, so you could also say the measure of angle 5. And so using some other properties, we could also say some other things, but we'll leave it at that for now. Okay, the next one, number 11, we are going to say, we're going to tell what is the measure of angle 2. So just like with the previous one, you tell me what the measure of angle 2 would be equal to. So which other angle would it have the same measure as? So your answer is going to be the measure of angle something. And there's 3 different answers that you could put for that without stretching too far. Okay, so it should be the measure of angle 3, angle 6, and angle 7. Okay, number 12, the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2. So let's look at the picture. The measure of angle 1 and the measure of angle 2. If I added those two together, what's it going to be equal to? So if you remember from number 7 right there, our discussion on supplementary is going to be equal to 180 degrees. Number 13, the measure of angle 7 plus the measure of angle 8. That is also going to be 180 degrees. Number 14 is the measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 5. Okay, that's a little bit different. So angle 3 and angle 5, what are those going to be? Now there is a theorem from last year that you learned about, and these are either called consecutive interior, or they could be called same side interior. But there is a theorem about those and how they relate to each other. But you could also figure it out even if you didn't know, because if you know that angle 3 is going to be equal to angle 7 because they're corresponding angles, and I know that angle 7 plus angle 5 is equal to 180, well then angle 3 plus angle 5 would also have to be 180 because of substitution. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use some of our translating skills into writing an equation and then using our solving equation skills to solve. So it says for each problem, write an equation and then solve. You may write your answer as a decimal. So that doesn't come along very often, but in this you can write a decimal if you need to. So it says if the measure of angle 3 is equal to 5w minus 20. So let's come up to our picture and let's write that. 5w minus 20, that's what that angle is. The measure of angle 1 is equal to 115. Find W. So the question is, what do I know about this angle and this angle? What do I know about those two angles? I know that the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2 is equal to what? Or sorry, not 2. 3, angle 3 is equal to 180 degrees. So what we can do is we can substitute. Instead of the measure of angle 1, I can write 115. And instead of the measure of angle 3, I can write 5w minus 20. And now I have a multi-step equation to solve. So look for like terms. 115 minus 20, they're both constants, so I can put them together. 115 minus 20 is going to be 95 plus 5w equals 180. And then I'm going to solve that. I'm kind of running out of space. I'm going to come over here. So I'm going to cover up with my finger the w part, so I'm going to get rid of the 95. So I'm going to take away 95. Whoops. So I'm going to have 5w is equal to, and then 180 minus 95 is 85. And now it's a one-step equation, so it says 5 times w. I'm going to divide by 5. And so w is equal to 17. And so that's what w is equal to, and I use the properties of parallel lines and properties to solve an equation to be able to figure that out. Okay, for the next problem, we're going to do a similar type thing. So it says the measure of angle 5 is equal to 3x minus 7, and the measure of angle 6 is equal to 5x plus 3. So first question is, what do I know about the angle 5 and angle 6? Well, I know that the measure of angle 5 plus the measure of angle 6 is equal to 180 degrees because they're supplementary. So what I can do is I can substitute. Instead of the measure of angle 5, I can write 3x minus 7. And then instead of the measure of angle 6, I can write 5x plus 3. And now I solve that equation. So what I do is I look for like terms, 3x and 5x. What is 3x and 5x? And then negative 7 plus 3. Now it's a two-step equation. So I'm going to look for, what do I do first? I'm going to add 4 first. And so I'm going to have 8x is equal to 184. 8 times x, I'm going to divide by 8. And so I'm going to have x is equal to, and it's going to be 23. And so that's what x is equal to for that one. Okay, and then the last problem is if the measure of angle 8, let me erase all this other stuff I've got so it's not distracting, says if the measure of angle 8 is equal to 60 degrees, and the measure of angle 5 is equal to 4x minus 4, then find x. So what do I know about angle 5 and angle 8? What do I know about them? You can look back on previous problems because you've already written this down somewhere, but we know that the measure of angle 5 is equal to the measure of angle 8. We wrote that previously. So what I can do is I can substitute. Instead of the measure of angle 5, I can write 4x minus 4 is equal to, and instead of the measure of angle 8, I can write 60, and you have a two-step equation to solve. So get the x by itself. So I'm going to add 4. So I'm going to have 4x is equal to 64. I'm going to divide by 4. So I'm going to have x is equal to 16. And that's what x is equal to. Okay, so you should be able to solve the equations in your homework. You can go back and refer to these examples to help you if needed.